All right, what's up, Freedom Summer family? We are here again for another clergy roundtable conversation. We started this experience just a few weeks ago where we are bringing these conversations out of our Zoom enclaves, our Zoom silos, and putting them out for the world to digest. And to engage. And I'm grateful today to have the Reverend Dr. Martha Simmons with us today, who has expertise in so many things. She is what Dr. Brad Braxton has affectionately termed Black Church Central. And so most things that relate to the Black church, she has either led in some way, consulted in some way, created in some way. And so we have a great treasure in terms of a conversation partner today. You all know her from her writing. You all know her from Preaching and Preachers from Mondays. And so you know the kind of wisdom, the kind of genius, the kind of creative foresight that she brings to Black churches, and particularly as we think about doing ministry that transcends the walls of our congregations, which all of us are doing now because we are all outside of the wall. Hopefully, we are still outside of the walls of our congregation. I know many people have gone back. But for those of us who are still living into the virtual part of our bivocal reality, which I'm sure Dr. Simmons will talk more about as we get into today's conversation. But we are fortunate to have her with us today. Welcome, Dr. Simmons, to Freedom Academy. Welcome to Freedom Summer 2020.
Thank you, Pastor Francois. It's great to be with you.
Good. So we are here again. I start these segments by naming that the Black Church Action Fund is sponsoring Freedom Summer for this year. It is the C3 arm of the Black Church PAC. The Black Church PAC is obviously a political action committee that is actively working to influence legislation around criminal justice reform, around engagement around this particular election, which we have identified as one of the most consequential elections of all of our lifetimes. Dr. Simmons has a pretty her political memory, lived political memory is more extensive than mine. So I do caution when I say the most important election in my lifetime. But I think that I am telling the truth in terms of how our institutions are just fundamentally under assault, and the ways that assault on democracy is leading to deaths and casualties. But the Black Church Action Fund is primarily dedicated to organizing the Black church in order to put pressure on elected officials to curb gun violence, to end mass incarceration, and to make sure that there is representation for Black and brown folk in elected office. And so the Black Church Action Fund has endorsed this Freedom Summer experience, where there are 7 areas of policy concern that are being lifted, that are being engaged in terms of community education experiences like these: healthcare, local spending, voting rights, also jobs. And we also have been thinking deeply about ending mass incarceration, which is one of the fundamental features of what the Black Church Action Fund and the Black Church PAC do on a regular basis. I love the fact that the Black Church has these political arms that really help us to revive a particular tradition of the Black church, which we can those of us who consider ourselves social justice folk, we can sometimes over romanticize and convince ourselves that Black churches, all Black churches, function with the same kind of politics, and we can often over romanticize and convince ourselves that all Black churches were supporting the nonviolent civil rights movement led by which was popularized by Dr. King and others. But what we know is that the Black church has always had various communities within it. And we also know that that Black churches have always been aligned with white evangelicalism and white conservatives in ways, as there have been those who have been connected to the protest traditions of the Black church. So in the words of Raphael Warnock, who is running for Senate in Georgia, in your state, where your adopted state,
Amen.
you are now, Dr. Raphael Warnock is clear that there's the personal piety tradition of the Black church, and then there's the protest tradition of the Black church. And Freedom Summer is an outgrowth. It is the latest iteration. Freedom Summer 2020, that is the latest iteration, one of the latest iterations of the protest tradition of the Black church. So, Dr. Simmons, this is an important election. You have participated in many elections. You have voted for presidents. Some you have voted for have won, and others you have voted for have lost. But you do bring a particular political memory to this moment, a lived political memory to this moment, and you bring to this moment also years of church-based activism, of church-based community organizing. So can you, just as a way of opening us up in this conversation around voting and its significance, can you talk to us about what about this moment makes it a different sort of political crisis than other moments you lived in that we also saw as bad, like Bush, like Reagan, like Nixon? What makes this unique, singularly detrimental for our democracy?
Oh, there's several things, but I think one of the makes this election so critical and different from any other that I've seen, and we've had some presidents that were bad for people of color, bad for poor people, bad for the economy, and bad for the environment. But this president is bad at every level, unless you are a rich white man. He is bad at every level. He's bad on his environmental policies. Certainly, he's bad on creating jobs for everyone. He's bad, certainly, when it comes to justice issues. In fact, I don't even know if we can still say where we've even got a Justice Department. He is bad on health care. And so we've got a pandemic that we definitely didn't have to have 170,000 people die from. But he is so bad when it comes to healthcare and believing in science that not only did people die needlessly, but they are still dying. And it's projected that by the end of September, 200,000 people will have died. And many of those deaths were needless. They were needless, and they were caused by not his negligence. And, it's one thing to say that a person in office is negligent, inept. His was purposeful. It was purposeful. And when you let people die purposefully, it is beyond time for you to leave. It's beyond time for you to leave. This is not as if this man is conducting a war on the home front. On the home front, not Vietnam, okay? Not Syria. On the home front, he is simply allowing people to die just because he can. Just as he's allowed children to linger in cages at the border, not because it has helped this country in any way, okay? Because all of his policies directed toward the border have failed. They failed. But purposefully, he is allowing children and their families to be harmed. We've never seen anything like this vicious, this callous, this unconcerned, this inept, a president who does not read, a president who is so inarticulate that he can't even pronounce Yosemite. We've never seen anything this bad, and we've seen some bad presidents. The other thing that makes this particularly bad is that the party of this president is fearful of him. I've never seen anything like that either. I've always seen presidents get the backing of their parties, but there were always voices, and I mean multiple voices, that would stand up and say, no, that's wrong. We're not doing this. We need to rethink this. The party is silent for the most part, 99% of them, on everything this man does, no matter how egregious. No matter how egregious. And that is a recipe for continued disaster if we allow him to stay in office, since we know that his party is not going to say anything, they're not going to do anything, they're not going to block anything. It's a recipe for disaster, not to mention all of the unqualified judges that he and Mitch McConnell continue to put on the bench, which will impact the bench for the next 20 to 30 years. And so when you look at talking about you want criminal justice reform, you want policies changed, his people have been put on the bench to do his bidding. And so, like I said, the longer this goes on, the worse it gets. I can't express enough how critical this is. And they're probably, I was looking at something in, I think it was the New York, I could be wrong, but I think it was the New York Times not too long ago. And there were about 20 major areas where this president has been a total failure, unless you are a rich, white, straight man.
Wow.
That they gotten a few things from him, but everybody else, you're on your own.
So the Black Church Pact and the Black Church Action Fund, as a mission, it talks about building Black independent political power, right?
Mm-hmm.
And seeing the church as a vehicle for building Black independent political power. I want to ask a question. What in your opinion, what is Black political power? Like, what is Black political power? And how does the church actually help us as a very diverse community of Black folk, people who are descendants of chattel and people who are descendants of African immigrants and other diasporic immigrants? What is political power for Black folk, and how do Black churches actually participate in building it?
Political power for Black folk is the same as political power for white folk. It's the ability to get policies enacted that allow your people to thrive and not starve, not go without needed resources, and have a voice through you as their agent. If you cannot get legislation enacted, if you can't get laws passed, that's very little political power. If all you can do is talk, okay, you can't get any laws passed, you're lacking in political power, which is one of the reasons this current president has so much power, is because the Republicans control the Senate. And they passed one law after another, along with the things that he's put in place. And the Democrats, for the most part, have not been able to stop them. So you see the area that handled diversity for the White House, it's gone. The CDC has been kneecapped. Social Security, he's getting ready to go after as,
Oh, good.
part of his going after entitlements. Um, the environment he's wreaking havoc on, and is steadily allowing new laws every week to wreak more havoc on. So unless there's legislation to stop him, okay. So if when you talk about political power, you have the ability to enact laws. You also have the ability to get people to coalesce around issues. I remember I spent over 20 years in San Francisco. And when the AIDS pandemic hit, the LGBTQ community didn't have a great deal of power. But they realized real quickly that they had to get some people in office, and then they had to coalesce around the people who they put in office. Not all of the people they put in office were LGBTQ, but they were not going to support you if you did not support them, and enact some city policies that would help them with all of the needs that they had during the AIDS pandemic. And so, from watching that community that was very active, in fact, ACT UP, which I wish we had a new version of, was a part of that, I guess, coming of age for political power for the LGBT community, basically, not just in San Francisco. San Francisco impacted the whole country. So, like I said, if you can't enact laws that help people to thrive, not just survive, okay?
Sure.
Not just survive, but to thrive, then you really don't have any political power. You may believe that you do, but it won't help the people. It won't help the people. It definitely won't help those with the greatest needs.
Okay, Doc, you just helped me think about something, because a lot of what we allow to pass as prophetic preaching doesn't really pass the political smell test.
That's right.
I've heard, even people like Dr. Jerry Carter say sometimes we limit ourselves to just ranting in the pulpit. Let me ask you a question that's really, really in your wheelhouse. You are probably, and it will probably be said, that you're one of the most influential homileticians of our time. You are definitely the griot of Black preaching traditions. I don't know anybody that can talk it better than you. And I'm interested.
You are very kind. You are very kind.
In how do you preach, right? And I'm not saying this every week. I'm not saying we should make a weekly guide out of this. I'm not saying that, because some people automatically assume that. But I'm interested that how do we preach when it's appropriate, when it's time, in a way that impacts legislation? Is that possible? Is that something we should be thinking about?
It's absolutely possible. It's been done for hundreds of years. It's absolutely possible. One of the ways, there's several ways to do it. One of the ways that you can do it is to set every sermon up, so that it's a trivocal sermon. And Kenyatta Gilbert coined that phrase. And by that, he means the sermon, after it's completed, should show something that's priestly or pastoral. It should show something that's sagely, or meaning wisdom. And it should show something that's prophetic. Now, depending upon the occasion and your intent, you will favor one over the other in the sermon. So a priestly sermon may come forth, and because of the occasion, in a prophetic sermon, you'll give more attention to that. But all three of those should be in a sermon before we get to the pulpit. And so if you want to talk about how to address the political issues of your day, remember that, and that will lessen a lot of the ranting that I often hear as people talk about this political moment. They're just ranting. They're just ranting.
Mm.
But if you want to enact legislation, what has to happen in your preaching is that it has to be thick enough
Mm.
for people to say, number one, oh, the preacher was talking to me. The preacher was talking to me. Okay. So it has to be communal, has to connect with the people.
Sure.
Number two, the preacher is talking about something political, but he or she has shown me the direct connection to my life. The direct connection to my life, not ranting about how bad they believe someone is doing X, Y, or Z, but they've shown me the direct connection to my life. So you should be able to set up a sermon for seniors to show them, as well as their children, as far as that goes,
Mm.
how gutting entitlements directly impacts their lives. And so when the Bible talks about taking care of widows and how we treat our elders, you should be able to just draw a straight line from the Bible to what it means to gut entitlements, especially for people of color. What often happens, which is why sermons have very little impact in terms of impacting legislation, is that there's a lot of ranting.
Mm.
It's just ranting. Or we take a 30-minute sermon, and I hope they're not any longer than 30 minutes. We spend 25 minutes or 20, let's say 20 minutes naming the problem.
Mm.
Naming the problem, which anybody could do. Anybody could tell you when a president's bad. Anybody can do that. What we don't do is say, here are some solutions. Here are some solutions that will get us moving. Here are some solutions. You know, I remember, I think I was about maybe 16 or 17 going to a youth rally. You remember, you know what those youth rallies are like. And so, they had the singers to come on and etc. And we having a great time and etc. And as the youth rally is we all hyped up and etc., this person came on and talked about the importance of voting, the importance of voting. And he said, some of you are 17, soon to turn 18. And he did basically a historic trek of our people and talked about why, if you wanted changes in your neighborhood, in your community, because this was on the west side of Chicago, which was pretty rough back then. Nothing compared to now, though, believe it or not. Uh, yeah. But he talked about how important it was that you become a voter as soon as possible. Then he showed us what our elders had done as well
Mm.
and how we could make a difference. And from that day until this one, that stuck with me. I am still convinced that we have to, we have to get involved civically. Voting is the baseline. That's just the baseline.
Right.
You
Right.
just have to do the baseline.
Right. Right.
But there are times when you need to be deeply engaged, and this is one of those moments. It is what it is, and we've got one job. We've got one job. We've got one job, and the job is not to rant.
Mm.
And for clergy, the job is not to say, I voted and here's my sticker. We got to do more than that this time. We've got to do more than that. So I've been asking clergy around Atlanta, will you be responsible for your polling place?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's where you vote or if your church is a polling place. So in Georgia, from 7 a.m. until about 8:30, will you or someone working with you make sure that we don't have to endure 3 to 4 hour lines and that people don't show up to vote and are automatically given provisional ballots under a claim that something that they did something wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Someone, because I'm going to be a poll monitor, someone has to be there. And so it is bothering me. It is bothering me that I'm only seeing, because, we've, in the last, 4 months, we put out about 400 different Zoom sessions on any and everything.
Yeah.
But there are only a handful of groups that are saying this one is different. This is why it's critical. We have to do more. And as I flip around, as you well know, I love preaching, and I listen to the preaching and the announcements. I'm not hearing it either.
Wow.
And I'm wondering, what the heck are we thinking? We're ranting and raving all over Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, but we're not giving people solutions to move anything forward. And I'm just at a loss as to how we don't think that this time we've got to do more than tell our people go vote. I'm at a loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doc, can I ask and you've always been really good in particularly being appropriate on naming the major themes of preaching that will keep our sermons from being dull and thin, right? You were talking about these major themes that we don't preach anymore. I know sin was one of them. You talked about that. Grace was one of them. Love was one of them. That you list it's actually in Doing the Deed. I believe it's listed out in one of the sections on Doing the Deed. Let me ask you this, and it could be connected to this, and maybe it's not connected to that. If we want preaching that builds political power, what should we be preaching from our pulpits in this crisis?
Of course, we got to preach justice.
Yeah.
You got to preach justice.
Which is one of the major themes you named.
Right. You got to preach justice. I think you also got to preach grace. You got to preach grace, because there are people who we want to be politically involved who've never been. And instead of wasting time degrading people, you didn't vote for this. Our job is to simply say, as long as you get it now, okay, we good. We are good. Because each of us has had an area in which we were derelict or fallen down and etc. So we ought to be preaching some grace as we are designing policies, getting people to the polls, encouraging young people. We ought definitely be preaching grace, which is in line with our saying, if you've done your time and you paid what you owe to society, you ought to be able to vote. You ought to be able to vote. So, we definitely ought to be preaching justice. We definitely ought to be preaching grace. We ought always be preaching love. The thing that has me so fired up, I guess, and in some days angry, is that if you love people, you care about what harms them. You care about what harms them. So I love children. I love old people. I love people. And so it upsets me that we don't have a national plan to send kids back to school. We're going to let them get sick. And as we look at high schools and grammar schools, we know they're going to get sick because the schools are poor.
Right.
We're going to ask teachers to even provide some of the things to keep the children safe as the teachers get sick. It's ridiculous. And you cannot talk about loving people and not recognize some of the structural, and this is the other problem we make in preaching. We rarely get to the structural sins.
Facts.
Okay.
Facts.
We'd love to talk about your problems, your individual. So, you drink, you cheat, you lie, etc. But we don't want to talk about the structural issues. And if you want your preaching to be thick in this season, all of our political concerns are structural. They're not individual, they're structural. The whole country is going down. These are structural issues. So I really wish clergy would learn, especially some of my evangelical brothers and sisters, learn how to address structural sin. Structural sin. I know you're going to get to the rest of it. You're going to tell me I'm a liar, I drink too much, I'm a fornicator. You're going to get to that. But please, in this season, and I would offer every season, get to the structural sin if you want your preaching to be thick and if you want people to follow you and go do something. If you want them to follow you and go do something, you've got to introduce them to the structures that are killing them. There's a reason structurally that guns are allowed to come into Chicago from 3 or 4 other states.
Right.
Structural. There's a structural, on purpose, could have ended 20 years ago reason before the violence got to where it is. It could have ended. Okay. But the gun laws in this country are just allowed. And like I said, in this current administration has done absolutely nothing to lessen gun violence. Absolutely nothing. Okay. And so if we could get to justice, we could get to grace, we could get to love. So most of the big themes will work in any season. They'll work in any season. But when you have a crisis season, you have to look at the causes of the crisis. And of course, my evangelical brothers and sisters would say, well, it's all caused by sin. That's good, generally. Now, what's the specific sin? What's the specific sin? Okay. And that's what we have to do.
Yeah.
So we got to do more specific preaching instead of all of this generalized ranting. And we also have to make sure we deal with structural sin.
Yeah.
If I can really help young preachers make their preaching thick, it would be teaching them. Do you understand structural issues? Do you understand what a structural sin is and how it operates?
I mean, I think that's just the one that you just mentioned about and it's not white evangelicals, it's the evangelical ethos itself that often lives in Black churches that says, oh no, racism is because of sin, but it doesn't call racism a sin, right? It lets racism off the hook by saying, no, it's caused by sin without saying that it actually is a sin. And then I've often heard our evangelical brothers and sisters say, well, there's nothing we can do about XYZ because sin is going to always exist. They say things like that. Right. Well, we won't be able to end racism because of Adam's sin and because of the fall of, and this is how they talk, the fall of man. That's the language that they use around it. It's an escapist mentality. So there's this. So just that kind of thing, you just demonstrated how theology can actually get in the way of building real power that changes lives.
It absolutely does. And we call it the fall of man, and then we blame it on Eve.
And then we blame it.
Oh yeah, it's a fall of man, but we blame it on the woman.
Right.
But it's about our not understanding, or and what I've seen a lot of throughout my life is cowardice.
Mm.
Cowardice. And so we hide behind there will always be sin. Well, if there was always going to be sin, then Jesus didn't have to heal nobody. Okay? Jesus didn't have to tell people to live right. He didn't have to do any of that.
Yeah.
Okay? He just could have come and say, okay, there's always going to be sin. And, I'm here as your savior, but there's
Right.
always going to be sin. He didn't have to do anything.
Right.
He didn't have to do anything. And if
Mm.
we find it acceptable to say, I read the Bible, especially as the old folks used to say, that red letters in the
Yeah.
Bible,
Yeah.
and we can say there's nothing we can fix. Okay, after reading those red letters, okay, we've misread the Bible.
Right. Right. Right.
And I'm talking about doing structural change, not just charity, not you give out some turkeys on Christmas
Sympathy and charity are not going to save this country
at all. At all. No, what they do is they give churches something else to hide behind.
Yeah.
They give them something else behind. So we got a closed pantry. We gave out some turkeys. We gave out some toys for Christmas and et cetera. When what they could have done was said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to get a health center built in our community.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to get a health center built because there are too many sick people in this community without transportation that don't have this particular service. Or we're going to make sure, and I think it was Charlie Dates and Otis Moss and some others who said there were seniors in Chicago who couldn't have food delivered during a pandemic because they were on, I don't know if it was Medicaid or Medicare or something like that, but they didn't qualify. Okay. I guess that was supposed to be a fancy service that they didn't qualify. But those preachers got together and said, oh, no. This is absurd. This is absurd. And so they got that law in their city changed. Okay. They didn't sit back and say, well, there's always going to be sin. So, the seniors will just have to be endangered. It go to the grocery store or whatever, So it's absurd, but it's often, like I said, it's our cowardice, and it gives us something to hide behind.
Mm.
I'm convinced, having spent over 50 years in the church, and I mean church big C, that much of what needs to be done, according to the Bible, does not get done because of our cowardice. It's our cowardice.
Yeah.
It's not that the problems are insurmountable. It's our cowardice and a lack of imagination.
Yeah.
Cowardice and a lack of imagination. Wow. That's how this country got to where it is now. That's why we got the president we have now.
Right. Right.
There were people who were afraid of the others, as they call brown people and others. And that's how we got this president. It was fear, which was really cowardice, and a lack of imagination. Just a lack of even basic imagination.
Wow.
Okay. We don't even see basic imagination. Like, can you get two churches together to clean up 5 city blocks? Okay. Can you get two churches to not just say, oh, we adopted a school. Everybody can adopt a school. Can you adopt a juvenile detention center?
I like that.
Do you have enough imagination to do that?
I like
Since
that.
you keep ranting and raving about the school to prison pipeline, just adopt a juvenile detention center.
Yeah.
You'd be amazed at the difference it makes to keep kids out of the system at that level. It's a major, but churches are like, no, we adopt the school because we don't have enough imagination to see the connection to the future of those children and the criminal justice. We just, like I said, There are days that I just wonder, do we should they offer classes at every denominational gathering in all seminaries on justice and imagination, justice and imagination.
That's good. Now, Doc, there's a concept you turned me on to about a month ago, and I went and I read about it for some work I'm doing. Spiritual bypassing. It sounds like that's what's getting in the way right now. We're allowing ourselves to hide behind bad theology and traditionalism. You know, and the traditionalism, the way Serene Jones talks about it, the dead faith of the living.
Right. Absolutely.
It's spiritual bypassing. We're scapegoating.
Right.
And you're saying no, it's something deeper than that. Which is a crisis of imagination. We don't actually have the imagination to be the community of Jesus.
Right. Yeah. I'm saying, spiritual bypassing, I think, came from a psychologist. He's a psychologist or a social worker.
He's a psychologist.
And what we've done in terms of losing our imagination is we've just decided we could settle. We could settle for whatever the traditions are that are going forth in the church when we've become a part of the church. And then we woke up shocked when our young people were gone. We woke up shocked when our communities were in trouble. We woke up shocked when people said, you know what, I'm doing church just 2 Sundays a month. We woke up shocked with plenty blame to give to the people. But I didn't hear those discussions about how did the church get here and what was our role in allowing this to happen. Okay. And like I said, a big one, we don't have a justice imagination or imagination period for doing not even, although I want us to do the major things, I'd be happy if we just did a lot of the minor things. Just adopt a juvenile detention center. Okay, just clean up, get a brigade to clean up a neighborhood and take care of seniors' houses. Okay, just open your imagination enough just to do the minor things before we get to building health centers and passing legislation. Because what I've learned about doing social justice work is that it's a building block. It's a building block. So if you teach kids that all people matter, okay, then you can rear them so that they become justice advocates. But it's a building block. And it's the same for churches. It's the same for churches. So I want to encourage pastors, get your church, even the COVID-19 church, get your church involved in small ways and help them to grow into major initiatives. But for God's sake, get them involved. Yeah. Do not become so insular that all of your programs are for people who attend your church and you don't have many great ones for them. Okay. Because you don't have any imagination.
Right.
Your people are sitting there saying, oh my God, we can't find spouses and we are getting divorced. And the church is saying, okay, we're going to give you one workshop and bring in a married couple and they're going to talk to you all. And the church is finished. And the divorced people are sitting there going like, wait a minute. Wait, well, where's the rest of it? We don't even have enough imagination to say we're going to hold regular workshops, clinics, whatever you want to call them, Zoom sessions, to help people who are divorced, to help people who are married, to help people who want to be married. We can't even do that one.
Wow.
It's just stunning. It's really, really stunning. And I'm hopeful. I got a lot of money on your generation. Because my generation and the one after me, we've missed it. We've missed it. And of course, you've always had those exceptional people out there who are doing the work and sharing the heavy load. I'm
Sure.
talking about the majority. I'm talking about the majority. I was talking to someone the other day, and I hate to give you a long answer, but I think this is significant. And I'm long-winded. I was talking to someone the other day because I was looking at a dissertation, and the dissertation concerned the Montgomery bus boycott. And one of the things that, as we were discussing this, that they discussed is how churches became just resource banks because they had to. They were already resource banks in small ways. But after they were threatened and were not allowed to enter many places of business because of the boycott, they just became resources. So you could get a ride to work. You could, if there wasn't a black cleaners, if somebody went to the white cleaners, they would bundle clothes so that several people could get their clothes clean. Okay. And see, that's imagination. You didn't just take your clothes and put three or four other black people in danger going to this white cleaners, but you had a good relationship with them, although they were crackers. You still had a decent relationship. So you bundled clothes and you took clothes for a whole bunch of people at one time. And like I said, there's just some basic resources that we've got to be able to do.
Are you putting that one in the sermon illustration book?
I could. I might.
You really could. You really could.
I just might.
Doc, this has been a good combo. I have one more question for you. I'm gonna let you close on that this last question I have for you. But everybody that's watching, I want you to go to thefreedomsummer.org, and there you can check your registration status, voter registration status in your state. You can request an absentee ballot, a provisional ballot, an absentee ballot from your state, and you can actually start the process of registering to vote there. The Black Church PAC is working with vote.org, and so we want you to go right now to thefreedomsummer.org. Go to thefreedomsummer.org, check your voter registration status, request an absentee ballot, or start the process of registering the vote. You can do it all in one place. We are going to get as many people registered to vote as possible, and then we're going to turn them out. We're not just getting people, we're going to turn them out. I just found out a day or so ago, we're getting ready to work on this, that 3 towns over from me, these are Republican towns with some black families. There are 2,500 eligible black voters in one of these towns. And 0% of them are registered to vote.
Lord have mercy.
2,500 registered eligible voters, eligible black voters, and 0% of them. I think the actual number, maybe 3 or 4 people out of the 2,500 people that are eligible to vote are actually registered, and 0 of them voted in the primary, in the midterm election. So we're gonna go see what's good. That smells a lot like Mississippi to me.
That sounds like some sections of Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia.
We're gonna go figure out what's happening there. But
go ahead.
Just your question. You in doing the deed, you talk about sermons. I want to use the exact phrase you use. I don't know if it's a behavioral ethic.
Focus.
Behavioral focus. the sermon is supposed to cause us to do something when we leave, right?
That's right.
What should if you could name 3 things that our preaching should be causing people to do between now and January 2021, when the inauguration of the 46th president happens, what should our preaching be telling people to do?
Yeah. I think number one, and I want to say just before I answer that, make sure if you're going to vote absentee ballot, and a lot of people are, although this president is trying to do some crazy stuff with the post office, get that ballot back in 21 days before the election.
Yeah.
21 days, not 10 days. 21 days before the election, and I'm going to be saying that up until election day, 21 days before. In terms of what our preaching ought to be telling people, I think the first thing it ought to be telling them is that they are powerful. It ought to be telling them, no matter how bad this looks, no matter who's in charge, no matter that, the COVID-19 is out here, despite all of that, this is a moment to tell your people that they have power. They have power. And so if you can convince them they have it, then you can move toward helping them exercise it. But number one, please tell your people they have power. And don't just make it a pie in the sky kind of thing. They have power right now on this plane, on this earth. Number two, please, please, please tell your people that they can hold on. Give the people some hope. These times they look really bad for a whole lot of people. A lot of people are about to become homeless because the Senate has just said, it's not important that we extend unemployment and other programs. Help your people to hold on. And that's something that the Black preacher has done well historically. We need to push that. So let the people know that they've got power. Number two, give them some hope. And number three, let them know that they can make the difference. So they can't stay at home and moan no matter how bad it looks. So help people to understand that they've got some power and that they can be a change agent. They can be a change agent. If they can only get 2 other people to the polls, that's a change. That's a change.
Wow.
If they could only keep the seniors on their block safe by making sure that they have groceries brought to the door, water brought to the door, that's a change.
Yeah.
Help people to understand that they've got some power and that they can be change agents in this season. I'm afraid. I'm glad that there seems to be a lot of energy around getting this man out of office, but I'm afraid that as things worsen with the economy, worsen concerning COVID-19, just worsen for people economically, that people are going to lose hope and not see themselves as change agents. And they didn't fill out the absentee ballot and send it back in time, and they won't go to the polls. They won't even go. They'll say it's bad, but they will be so worn out, so worn down that they'll say, my vote doesn't count. My vote doesn't count.
Yeah.
And in this season, we have to let people know you count.
Yeah.
You count. If that's a trick that gets played on people, because we elected a lot of mediocre or average politicians. And so people say there's nothing in it for me.
Yeah.
So, young people say, look, You all keep voting all these people in, and look, it hasn't helped. Well, if you live more than 10 minutes, you've seen the changes, the social changes that have come about because we did get some people in office who cared.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting to me, as people rant about how bad things are, and they are bad. They can't imagine how bad they used to be. They cannot imagine how bad they used to be. How bad they used to be. I was reading, as I was reading about the Montgomery bus boycott and some of the stuff that was happening in 56 and 55 and 56. And I was born shortly thereafter. And I was like, Lord, uh, I was born at a moment so much better than the people who were born in 1950. Just 1950.
Yeah.
1950. So, things are bad, but things don't get better because you sit around and talk about how bad they are.
Yeah.
They only get better when you get involved at your local level, at the national level, sign petitions, send in letters, tweet about stuff, tell your neighbors, tell your friends. So, although we can all get together and talk about the fume, not the funeral, but the fume for Greenleaf, I think we could also get together and do some watch parties around voting and around how we get some people to the two polling places. Just get people out. So, like I said, I'm going to be talking about it on my broadcast, Preaching and Preachers, doing it on Instagram as well. In fact, I'm going to say a little bit about voting later on Instagram today. And that's Preaching and Preachers as well on Instagram, because we need all hands on deck.
Yeah.
We got one job. And we've got to do it well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Simmons, for giving us your time and your wisdom today. I hope that everyone that has listened is prepared to preach differently, prepared to hear preaching differently as we move into this very, very consequential election period that will start as early as mid-September as we start to drop these votes into our mailboxes, into drop boxes, and then showing up where we need to and where we can on election day. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Again, I want to remind you, go to thefreedomsummer.org, check your voter registration, request an absentee ballot, and start the process of registering to vote right there, all in one place. I promise you, folk where Dr. Simmons lives in Georgia, they know that you better check your voter registration status. Show up and they'll tell you they didn't purge you from the roll. So check your status so that we can make sure that we show up with as much power so that we can demonstrate power and continue to grow our power this election cycle. Tomorrow we'll be on for Woke Wednesday. Woke Wednesday starts at 6 p.m. and we're talking about voting and a new economic imagination. We have the Reverend Dr. Delman Coates that will be joining us, and Deirdre Reed, a celebrated community organizer around education, healthcare, and all types of economic justice issues. So make sure you're with us tomorrow, this same place at 6 p.m. We'll see you soon. Peace.